Hello, students. This is the last chapter of this course, chapter 15, finishing the project and realizing the benefits. So, finishing the projects and realizing the benefits. There's three key things that we want to bring up. First, a project moves into the closing stage when its customers accept the project deliverables. A project can close as planned or be terminated early. You have to complete all closing activities. These are three areas that you have to consider when before you close out a project and start finishing it up and moving on to the next stages, which is realizing the benefits. That validation of scope, again, what is scope? It's all that, all the work that's being encompassed within the project, right? What's included in the project. That is the scope. So, typically at the end of the project, we got to validate that scope. So what does that mean? Formal acceptance of project deliverables. That's one. Buyer provides the seller with a formal written acceptance. The transition from executing stage to closing stage, that has to be determined, and as well as they have to use a project closeout checklist to itemize project activities or deliverables. So the PMBOK definition of validation of scope, which is formally accepting the completed project deliverables. These are good key bullet points for validating that scope, and it's all a process which we'll discuss further in some of these slides. So right here is just an example of a project closeout checklist, and it has items like, final certificate. This is an example of a closeout. These are all the items that have been identified as closeout items, and they determine who closed it out, the target date, and actual completion date, and then ultimately is signed by the project manager, the sponsor, or the vice president of construction. At least the example used for this particular model, but it can be typically the customer. Okay. Terminate projects early. When you terminate project early, there's three things that must happen. First, there must be a mutual agreement, right? What deliverables or partial deliverables go to the buyer? What some of the compensation goes to the seller? How to resolve outstanding issues with negotiated settlement. And then we have the terminations for default, which is problems with the project cost, schedule, or performance. It's a loss of confidence in the contractor. Also, the third item that we want to discuss is termination for convenience of the buyer. And there's three things you have to consider. The buyer faces unexpected difficulties in changing priorities. The customer needs change, and often it requires a payment to the contractor. These are basically it's a high-level overview of items that will determine if you can get out of a project earlier, whether it's from the customer side or the project provider side. So let's talk about the heading off early termination. So these are some of the things that can be done to do this. First, we need to find other stakeholders who can provide funds. We can look internally to find ways to continuing with the project. PMs must make recommendations for early termination if they feel it is warranted. You have to communicate quickly and honestly. Hey, listen, these are just keys. These are standard keys for if you want to try to head off that termination, if you don't feel it should be terminated, you have to plead your case. And in order to do that, these are 4 simple rules that you must follow in order to try and do that. Let's talk about the close out the project, which is to finalize all activities needed to finish the project. First, you need to write a transition plan. Secondly, there must be what's called a knowledge transfer. Then finally, you have to create the closeout report. So What is writing a transition plan? Basically, what this encompasses is just a charter slash instruction manual for how to use the project deliverables. You have to provide appropriate documentation to users. You have to ensure quality problems are avoided. You have to ensure the project deliverables and transition into operational roles, and you have to ensure maintenance upgrades and training take place. I mean, these are things that you have to account for in transitioning and writing and transitioning a actual project. Then we have to do what's called a knowledge transfer. What is it? A knowledge transfer should occur throughout the project life. Most apparent as a project comes to a close, you have to capture lessons learned. You have to disseminate and use lessons learned in order to help your organization improve. And this pertains to the fourth area of the balanced scorecard, growth and innovation. So, basically what you're doing is you're documenting all the things that has happened throughout the project. Any training involved, you need to go ahead and document that. Interviews with the project team members, you have to make sure you capture that and the lessons learned. And some organizations use a balanced scorecard. Not too many actually do that because there's a lot of time and energy to close out a project, and that's just one activity that some organizations may value it, but at least from my personal experience, most organizations don't. But understanding what occurred throughout the project life and making sure that you have your checklist of items to close it out and capturing the lessons learned and making sure that it is distributed to the appropriate people. That's important for a knowledge transfer. Capturing lessons learned at milestones. When you're capturing lessons learned, you typically want to capture those milestones at the end of the project. You have to identify the major project issues, and not only identify them, but determine how you resolve them, or how to resolve them in the future. One issue at a time to determine what went wrong and how it might be avoided in the future. Then there's a list of significant successes and discuss what caused each. What worked well? Where might a different method yield better results? Hey, why did we do a lessons learned? Because there are other projects out there that may be similar to the one that you worked, and maybe there's another PM or another sponsor or stakeholders who can use this as a reference to help them guide and manage their project that's coming in the future. So it's a valuable document if documented and properly, and it shows the right type of content. Isn't this an example of a project closing document? Is Exhibit 15.4 in your book, page 507 in your textbook. You see it has criteria, that's plan, actual learnings. You fill all that out. That criteria could be the outcome, the schedule, the cost. You have a column, you have a window for risk and countermeasures, communication plans, and implementations, and other learnings. What went well, what didn't, as another column, anticipated versus unanticipated. That's a column as well. I mean, this is just one example of a closing document. It's a pretty decent document, but each organization determines what that criteria, what that content may be, and it may be different. But this is just a good starter closing document for our purposes. Disseminate and use of lessons learned. So there's four key areas that we need to discuss. First is just the key to the knowledge management. You have to have a knowledge management key, maybe a reference towards some of the terms or some of the content. That's important. You have to establish a method of documenting and sharing lessons learned. You have to decide how to store lessons for easy access. You have to code each lesson by type of project, stage of project life cycle, or issue it as a concern. These, at least from a lessons learned standpoint, it helps you identify which project it pertains to, or what part of the life cycle that it pertains to. So it's easier to apply lessons learned for future projects down the line. Create the closeout report. This is a formal report which includes summary of the project's original justification, the ultimate status, and just the lessons learned. And basically, when you're creating that closeout report, you have to answer this question: did the project accomplish what it was originally approved to do? Hopefully, that question is answered with a yes. If it isn't, then there has to be some extraordinary circumstances of why it did not accomplish what was originally approved. This is an example, high-level summary of a closeout template. This deliverable is required for each small project. It contains a project charter, the original work breakdown structure, the summary of weekly progress reports, and the client feedback summary. So it has a list of tasks and item descriptions and whether it was satisfactory or unsatisfactory, and then there's an area for comments. Again, this closeout report is an example. However, many organizations, if they do utilize a closeout report, the content and summary for that report will vary based off of what is the key areas of focus for that organization and that project management office, PMO. Then we have what's called post-project activities. You have to reassign workers. You have to celebrate, celebrate success and reward participants. I think that should be promoted more. Because a lot of times, as a project manager and a project management professional, you close out a project and you just go on to the next. Hey, listen, accomplishing any project and being able to finish it from start to finish, I mean, that's an accomplishment. It's worth celebrating and rewarding participants, and going out for a happy hour, going out for dinner, something like that. I think is warranted if they can come. Provide ongoing support. There are activities, maybe typically regarding ongoing support, that you can't close out this most projects until a period of hypercare is done. But typically providing ongoing support is what has to happen during the project before you close it out versus what happens post the project. But there has been experiences where a project's closed out, you still got to support it or make updates or something like that. So that's not foreign. Ensure the project benefits are realized. You want to make sure that your project is doing what it was meant out to do, what that product or service that was developed, that was completed due to this project. Hey, is it doing what needs to be done? And typically, hey, if it isn't, if the benefits aren't being realized, maybe there's another project where we can make sure that it covers all the benefits instead of some of the benefits down the line. Reassigning workers. This happens all the time. You have to update personal records. You have to make honest recommendations. You have to team members secure next assignments. If you're in a matrix organization, your resources are just they're working multiple projects, and what typically happens is that once the project's done, you just move on to the next project, and that's up to your manager to kind of decide where you're going and what you're going to be doing. Ultimately, when you're reassigning workers, you're helping good workers secure follow-on work is one of the most important things that project manager must do. Hey, listen, if they're good at what they do, they're good at their craft, they won't have any problems moving on to the next assignment. So celebrate success and rewarding participants. There's an acronym that this book gives: is challenge, energize, limit, exert, believe, recognize, acknowledge, transition, ease, stress, challenge, right? Or celebrate, excuse me, not challenge, but celebrate. The project is over. We will limit any additional work on this project. This is an interesting acronym, but a lot of this stuff is true. You got to challenge, you have to energize. You want to limit, but exert. You have to believe, you have to recognize, acknowledge, transition, and hopefully it is a non-stressful process. That's the goal, right? Finally, we have what's called provide ongoing support. And the ultimate project goal is to provide capable customers who will uh, do two things. You have to use the deliverables you provided, and you have to recommend you for future work. It often requires support after the project is complete. Finally, here we have our last slide, which is ensure project benefits are realized. There's three things to consider. How well are the customers able to use the deliverables? You have to consider use for the direct customers and other stakeholders. And it may require follow-up for customers weeks or months after the project's in. And I'm a big advocate of that. You just don't deliver a product or service and be like, okay, done. Keep them, have fun. A lot of times with the customers, depending on what the product and service is, they'll have a lot of questions after it's delivered and they're actually using it. And we want to make sure that, it's just good customer service to make sure that, you delivered on what the project said you delivered. If they have any questions, you can help them out and follow up on to see how they're doing. So, if you're working for an organization or if you own your own organization, they'll want to do business with you again because they have a relationship with you and you're responsive towards the customer's needs. And that is it.